I've heard some crazy SLI horror stories ever since I've learned about it. People saying it makes games play worse, saying it burned out their PCs, others simply saying the power jump wasn't big enough to warrant the purchase, but despite these things, SLI never seemed to have any sort of stigma attached to it. Generally when someone says, I have SLI, others say, oh, awesome, congratulations man, or even, I'm jealous of the power within your PC. And it's kinda confusing. Well, a little bit ago the 1080 Ti came out, and I decided to buy myself two of them to see what SLI was all about, and if it was worth it. So how did they do? Let me tell you a story. Before you freak out though, I currently work at a job where I build computers, and I got these cards on a discount. The plan was, if I didn't like SLI, I could simply bring one back. Okay, now let's begin. So after I brought my graphics cards home and installed them into my PC, I realized the graphics cards were extremely powerful. Not powerful like you may think though. Powerful as in my power supply couldn't feed them. I had a 750 watt and the cards combined calculated to a whopping 623 watts. Luckily my friend had an extra 1000 watt lying around, and upon remedying the situation, it was time to test out some games. So I open up Grand Theft Auto 5 and crank every setting to the max. Now, GTA 5 is kind of a weird game. The engine doesn't really like any graphics cards, and VSync is pretty much an unfortunate must. Turning it on at 4K, mind you, gave me a frame rate of sub 30. I wasn't really confused at that point though, as I had MSAA up at ×8, so I turned that off and the frame rate stabilized around 52 frames per second. If I turned VSync off, the game ran at about 117 frames, but was choppy and slicey. Perhaps the resolution was too high, I thought to myself, and lowered the resolution to 1440p. The outcome was a little better, with the game averaging about 60 FPS with very regular drops down to 40. I was kinda disappointed. I mean, my 980 Ti ran this game better. At lower settings, of course. I turned the settings down where my 980 Ti settings had been, and the game ran flawlessly at 60 FPS, but as you can imagine, I was still very disappointed. See, a 1080 Ti is about $600 to $700. I spent $1,350 on two of them, and they ran the game about the same as my 980 Ti? This couldn't be right. I reinstalled the drivers and tried another game, but no matter what game I tested, the same outcome occurred. I tried Rust, The Mean Greens, Killing Floor 2, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter, Binding of Isaac. I mean, that one isn't much of a test, but you gotta play some Isaac. I tried Grip, Rock of Ages, Cluster Truck, and the only games that actually played better were Splinter Cell Conviction and CSGO. And CSGO didn't play better, it just had a higher frame rate up in the corner. Now, instead of doing the sensible thing, I chalked it down to my CPU. I have a 3960X, which isn't a bad processor at all, but had to be a bottleneck, right? That, combined with my motherboard utilizing only PCIe 2.0, had to be the issue. It wasn't until a few days later I looked up my processor and these cards running together, and not a single problem was befalling these reviewers. The only difference was they only had one 1080 Ti, not two. I opened my PC, removed one card, and loaded up GTA. Not only could I turn every setting up to max, besides MSAA, but I could play them at 4K with no frame drops, unless I went into the woods, in which case it went down to 57. Boo-hoo. I tried the other games that I played earlier, only to find that I was playing them all at 60 FPS at any resolution I wanted. Now I was annoyed. I popped the other card back in, reinstalled the drivers one last time, and launched GTA. Guess what happened? The game ran literally the same way it ran with one card in. So firstly, SLI makes the games run worse, and then in optimal conditions, SLI runs the games the exact same way. Even in GTA 5 at 4K, I cannot turn MSAA up to ×2 with both cards in. With one card I can pull it off, but two? Hell no. Now this is a really annoying situation because you, the consumer, are paying for something that is supposed to optimize your gaming experience, and for some it does, but it's a dice roll. I'm not going to say others who SLI these cards are having issues, because I am seeing videos of people having no problems in a lot of games, but even if SLI does work well 100% of the time, more games don't implement the ability to even use it, and in a real-world scenario, the games that do allow SLI don't optimize the game to run it correctly, so it either does nothing for you, best case scenario, or it makes the game run worse than if you just had one card. So why does this happen? Well, there are a few things that could cause this. To be honest, the 1080 Ti is still a very new card, and drivers could simply not be working correctly. This does tend to happen, and if you look at two 970s right now, you will notice they do help each other out in a lot of games. Not always, mind you, but sometimes it can just take time. The other issue is much bigger. When it comes to these video games, there is a very small market of games that actually could utilize SLI. Generally, these are big budget indies and small studios, devs who make open world games or space explorers, and then you have AAA developers. Smaller indies don't tend to make very taxing games, The problem then becomes said developer optimizing the games right for SLI, which can also contribute to this problem. Some developers do try their best, others do not, and this is kind of a large reason SLI may not be the best idea. Now, this is me being negative, and having two graphics cards can definitely be a good idea. If you have two lower gen cards, it can be nice having an extra boost, especially if you had one and decided to pick up another for super cheap. These cards can also be used as PhysX processors, which in reality doesn't help you in a ton of games and is not worth spending $1,300 for, but again, for lower gen cards could be a nice idea. If you're the sort of person who has 5+ monitors for some reason, multiple GPUs will help with that as well. To me, there really aren't a lot of pros that I can think of, and even researching pros only leads me to really small advantages. Even VRAM doesn't stack, so if you do buy a couple cards with 4GB of VRAM and go to play a VRAM heavy game like GTA 5, you're still going to be screwed. I've heard it said many times that it's better to have one powerful card than it is to have two weaker cards, but the same can be said for even two really powerful cards. Whoever said two heads is better than one used an absolute, and I don't like absolutes. That's how misinformation spreads. Would I recommend SLI? To be honest, no, I would not, and I'm probably going to give my second card to my brother. Better it be put to good use, but if you see this video and you're still thinking about getting SLI, I want to wish you the best. But just know that this is a bit of a gamble. You may have heard the poker term, the house always wins. Well, I hate that too because it's another absolute, but when it comes to these kinds of cards, you may not walk away with the chips you were hoping for.